stage, it is my privilege to introduce two longtime personal friends of mine, Kristina Ribali of the Foundation for Government Accountability, and Brad Jackson, who's one of our fellow contributors at RedState, also the producer of Coffee and Markets, a great podcast now on the radio in Chicago. They're here to discuss ways that we can empower individuals and community groups to have family and crisis solutions. You know, some of the alternatives to the not so good things that we've been seeing going on in the news media lately. So I'd like to welcome to the stage next Kristina Ribali and Brad Jackson.
All right, so since I know you all listen to Coffee Markets all the time, this is where you clap and say yes. There we go, thank you. This will be easy for you. So we were going to make this cocktails and markets, but they said no. However, you do not know what is in that coffee cup, and I do. So we're going to talk here. This is Kristina Ribali, Senior Coalitions Director?
Yes.
Yeah, at the Foundation for Government Accountability. Before we get started, Kristina, why don't you just tell everybody a little of what you do at FGA and what FGA does.
Sure. Thank you all for being here. It's really a privilege to be here in the great state of Georgia. Foundation for Government Accountability, we work at the state level to help empower individuals and strengthen families by reducing the welfare rolls and creating a system where people can rise from poverty and also create sustainable solutions to broken healthcare, welfare, and foster care programs. So my goal really here today is to talk a little bit about our failed war on poverty and how at the state level we really can bring it back to solutions that are community-based and without the role of government.
Okay, so you mentioned poverty for a minute. I want to talk about that. We, not long ago, passed the 50-year anniversary of the war on poverty, which I think it's safe to say was an epic failure. Yes. You guys have done some work on that recently, and there's some really terrible statistics around that. Why don't you talk about that for a minute?
When we think about the war on poverty, it's been, as Brad said, 50 years, and we as a nation have spent $22 trillion trying to remove people and rise people out of poverty. And yet we still basically have the same percentage of people at the federal poverty level or a little bit more. And so right now we're spending $934 billion a year in failed welfare programs. Think about that. It's almost $1 trillion a year. And there is not only a major fiscal implication to that, of course. We know we have an $18 trillion national debt. There is also political and moral consequences to keeping these programs that continue to spiral out of control, both financially, but they are hurting communities as well.
Okay, so you guys did some work on this, and I want to point this out. I want to be sure people get to hear this. You did some work on the political cost of these programs. And so this is, if you are poor and never on welfare, 33% of those people identify as Republicans, 30% of them identify as Democrats. If you're poor and currently on welfare, 13% of those people identify as Republicans and 53% identify as Democrats. That is such a big, big difference, and it comes from being on the government dime.
Yeah, again, we always talk about the moral cost and the fiscal cost, but we're all here at RedState because we love our country, right? And we're politically involved. Yes, we're here because we're trying to make a difference. There is absolutely a political cost when you continue to encourage by your policies a welfare class. And as Brad pointed out, the Foundation for Government Accountability, we did the largest poll ever of voters, and we asked 3,600 voters 58 questions about how they identify. And as Brad said, if they were poor but never were on welfare, 33% of them identified as Republicans, and only 30% of them identified as Democrats. Now that really doesn't surprise me because the working poor, they still believe in the American dream. They still want to work hard and rise from poverty. But when they get a government check, when they receive that welfare, as Brad said, it drops to 13% identify as Republicans and 53% identify as Democrats. Think about that swing. Think about what happens in these states where we continually keep expanding the welfare class, and we continually keep expanding things like Medicaid and the food stamp program and those programs, and we keep adding more and more people onto those systems. At some point, we're going to have way more people identifying as Democrats than Republicans, and then how do you win elections? That survey goes on to say that the poor who once accepted welfare but are still poor but they're working, they're off welfare and they're working again, that swings back the other way, and 32% of them identify as Republicans and 40% Democrat. And here's the statistic that I think is really important, because if we can keep folks from being stuck in this welfare system, if we can keep them from being stuck in the welfare class, 37% of middle-income Americans who have never accepted welfare identify as Republicans, and 31% identify as Democrats. So if we can stop it from the beginning and not have to, teach people how to get off the welfare system, do that thing, and we can put programs into place that help that at the state level, we can make a difference in the electorate.
Some of these numbers are kind of startling here when you think about what America spends on some of these programs. When you look at something, you guys have done some work on food stamps. There are now 47 million Americans on food stamps. 47 million Americans on food stamps. That's astonishing and terribly sad.
We have seen a major growth in the food stamp enrollment in the country. Right now on our Medicaid system, do you know we have 72 million Americans on the Medicaid system? That's 1 in 5 Americans living in poverty at the point where they require the government to pay for their health care. It's failed. And as you said, we've gone from in 2000, 17 million Americans on food stamps to in 2013, 48 million Americans on food stamps. A big part of that is governors are submitting work waivers. Does everyone here understand that at the federal level, they're required to work to receive food stamps? They're required to work if they're on food stamps over 3 months. Governors, a few years ago, under the Obama administration, started to submit work waivers to tell people, you don't have to work anymore to receive this help. And we have seen that population explode. In some states, as much as 250, 60%. State of Nevada, 195% increase in their food stamp usage. Here in the state of Georgia, it's well over 100, and I think 50% here in the state of Georgia. And there are things you can do, and we're going to talk about that at the local level. How do we restore the working class and reduce this dependency class? Because we believe, if you're compassionate, I'm a compassionate person. I want to see people rise from poverty. I don't want to see us promote programs that keep people there. And there's nothing more dignified than work. And we need to find ways that we can put our folks back to work and reduce the roles of, the dependency class and food stamps.
Talk about Medicaid for a moment, though. You guys have done a lot of work on keeping governors from expanding Medicaid in some of these states, and we've heard some of that from these speakers about what that means to your budget and the future health of your state. You guys have done a lot of work on that. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, Foundation for Government Accountability, again, we're looking for solutions. We're not looking to expand broken programs. And when we have these states that are accepting money from the federal government to expand these programs, we have seen just major over-enrollment. On average, 91% overages. So if you have a state that has said, we expect there to be 100,000 people enrolled, on average, those states where we have complete data, it's been 91% over those numbers. And what happens is you, as the state taxpayer, end up picking up that tab. And so we've done a lot of work in not only trying to stop Medicaid expansion, but then in the state level, be able to find solutions like community health centers, those sort of things, where we can provide health care at the local level for far less money, and it gives better care and better access to care. So that's one of the things we're doing as well as our Community Cares program. Talk
about welfare fraud is something that's rampant, something a lot of people I don't have a real concept of, but it leads to legitimate, real-world, terrible impacts because of this. Talk about that.
There are people in our society who we need to take care of that have no other choices. And we see that over and over and over again, there is fraud, waste, abuse in the system, and it prevents states from being able to do that efficiently. Take, for example, in the state of Illinois. We all know that in Illinois, dead people vote, correct? A lot. Did you also know that in Illinois, we found 3,000 people who were deceased still accepting Medicaid benefits? And to several tens of millions of dollars. So one of the things that we do is try to work with legislators to audit their Medicaid systems so that we can make sure that the people who are on the system actually qualify. And in the state of Illinois, when we passed, it was a bipartisan bill. It wasn't under Governor Rauner. It was in the previous administration. And when we passed that bill there, we were able to have them audit their welfare programs, and they found over 350,000 people on their Medicaid rolls who were not eligible. And in the first year, saved that state over $350 million alone. Now that's great, it's wonderful numbers, but you know why that matters? There's a young boy in the state of Illinois named Jacob Chalky. And Jacob Chalky has a life-threatening seizure disorder, and he was on Medicaid. And because their Medicaid system was so over-enrolled, and they had so many expenses in the system, and there was this waste, fraud, and abuse in the system, they were going to cut off Jacob Chalky's life-saving medication because they could not afford it. And programs and things that we do, we can go into the states and we can encourage them, and you as activists, bloggers, writers, all of you that are involved in your state can encourage your state, every state, to do an audit of your Medicaid system, to be able to save those resources for the truly needy, people like Jacob Chalky that didn't have other options, for the truly needy, and then that way we are saving those systems instead of having this massive waste and fraud and abuse. And if that's one state, we could save $350 million in one state of Illinois. What could we save in your state by putting some of these same audit measures in?
That's such a tragic story, and you published that, what was it, last year, earlier this year? Jacob's story?
Yeah, and we have a great video. If you go to our website, thefga.org, we have a great video under our solutions area that tells Jacob's story. And it's really, again, we're doing work in the states because we believe, like Governor Ricketts said yesterday, the states are going to be the ones that really push back on a lot of these things. And when you have a governor that will lead, and we can save a lot of these resources for the people who need them, and not for people who are able-bodied or are no longer eligible for their benefits.
Let's talk about something that I don't think gets a lot of coverage these days, and that's foster care. And that's not a sexy topic, so to speak, like Obamacare and stuff like that. It doesn't get a lot of attention. But it's one of those, it's a critical portion of our society, and it's something that's really broken. And you guys are pointing that out and some ways to fix it. Talk about that.
The foster care system, again, another government program that is overburdened, has a lot of need because, as we've seen again, with the welfare system and this war on poverty, it's had a huge impact on the strength of the family. And there are so many people right now in our country that don't have good family bonds, good community bonds. So we see in the foster care system broken lives and broken families. And right now in this country, we have over 400,000 children stuck in a overburdened foster care system. 400,000 children who are with a family that's unfamiliar to them and removed from their home. And it's not only a major burden on the budgets at the state level. Again, we're talking about children. You're a dad, I'm a mom. We're talking about kids who are removed from their family for summer, and 70% of them are from neglect. So one of the things that we're trying to do in the states, here in Georgia as well, if you're a Georgia activist, please connect with me. definitely want to talk to you about some of the ways that we can help some of these kids in your state. But there's a great organization out of Illinois called Safe Families Organization. And what they do is they work with churches and community, people in their communities, families, and they train and they screen host families to become a place of refuge for these children who are in crisis. And it help keep them out of the foster care system. It's all volunteer. It doesn't cost taxpayers money. The outcomes are far better. But in many states, that's not an option because there isn't a way for a parent to sign over a temporary power of attorney to someone. It's not recognized. And there's no legal protection in the legislature or any of that for a family to be able to come in and say, yes, I want to come alongside this family. And we talk about the broken foster care system. Some of the statistics are really horrifying, and this is one of the reasons that we're so involved in fixing this. We have 24,000 kids a year that age out of foster care. Where do they go? These are kids that don't have familial bonds. These are kids that don't have community. These are kids that their society around them is broken. What if there was a way to connect them with families that could mentor and love them all the way through and as they get older and continue to have a relationship? That doesn't happen in the foster care system because the incentives are different. Once that child is over 18, they're no longer in the system. So
the private market works better than the government. Oh, it's funny how that
Imagine
works
that, yeah. A couple other really shocking statistics. We hear a lot about sex trafficking in the United States. When asked, over 60% of the children in the sex trafficking industry had time in the foster care system. That's abhorrent to me, that we on the right aren't doing more to protect these children. There are ways. Again, Safe Families is a wonderful nonprofit organization that's doing this. 60% of the kids that age out through the foster care system get convicted of a crime. 71% of them, the females, will be pregnant by the time they're 21. And only 6% of them will graduate with a college degree. We owe our kids better than that, I think. I think we, as a society, can say that as parents, that's broken. So what can we do in states like Georgia? Like I said, we have SB 3, which is a bill in your legislature that we're going to work very hard in your state to pass to make sure that there are legislative protections for organizations like Safe Families and families that want to come alongside to have a temporary power of attorney for these kids that need some assistance. And again, it's charity, it's private charity, but in some states there's just not a legislative protection to do that.
Talk about what these folks can help you do and what you can help these folks do in their states. Particularly, you guys have some stuff going on in Georgia right now. What other states are you working in, and can these folks out here connect with you, and how can you connect with them? Because I think that's to help you guys do what you do.
Sure, so several things. Again, several things that we are working on is our Safe Families reform, which is our foster care work. We're also working on food stamp waivers. We have petitions running, I think, in about a dozen states right now to convince governors not to submit your work waiver, to make it again, to just reinforce that federal requirement that says if you want to receive food stamps, you're going to have to work. We saw those happen in Maine. How many of you guys have heard of Governor Paul LePage in Maine? Do you hear about him? Yeah. So he is reinstituting, he reinstituted work requirements for welfare. And again, I want to tell you a little bit about why we're so passionate about that. Not only are we rolling back the welfare class in the state of Maine, we're restoring dignity in the state of Maine. We are restoring opportunity to these folks who have been on the welfare system. There's a lady there, her name is Jill. She was a mom of 2 kids in 2007. She's addicted to drugs. She was facing felony charges. And in Maine, they put their Work First initiative and made it a requirement that if she was going to receive these benefits, she had to work. 7 years later, Jill is now just received a promotion. She's providing for her family. She's still the mother of her 2 kids, and she's working. She's working. She had the opportunity, like I said, got a promotion. She's back to work. And she, if this was a system that didn't require that, it would be doubtful that she would be able to do that. And in her own words, she hit rock bottom. And she needed them to sort of force her to go and do that. There's another guy, Dan Crosby. He's severe developmentally disabled. And he has a laundry business now out of his home where he goes and he collects laundry and he does it and he cleans and then he folds it and he returns it back to folks for a fee because that's how the markets work. And he's providing for himself because Maine reinstituted work requirements. And we can put close to probably 4 million people back to work in the United States if we could get these governors not to submit work waivers and just to say, look, we're just going to reinforce what the federal government says we're supposed to do. And the federal government says if you're going to accept SNAP benefits, you need to be working. So we're asking Governor Deal in the state here of Georgia to not submit that work waiver. So if you are a local activist, and we're doing this in North Carolina and South Carolina and Arizona, in Michigan and Ohio. So if any of those states, please find me. I'm going to be out here afterwards. I want to talk to you about ways as an activist that you can get involved and really help at your local level to put people back to work, restore dignity, and help restore the working class in your state.
We've heard from practically every presidential candidate so far. We'll still hear from Governor Walker before this is over. But this is one of those things that really points out how important it is for you to have good local legislators, a good governor, good, all the way up and down the chain. You have to do a good job at making sure your representatives speak for you and can support the policies you support. I think it's important for everybody to remember.
And that's a great question to ask your presidential candidates and your governors. What are you doing to shrink the size and the role of the welfare class in your state? What are you doing to put people back to work? Did you submit a work waiver? Don't be afraid to ask them that. These are ways that we know we can reduce the size and the scope of government and the cost and the societal cost of taking away the opportunity for folks to work out of that poverty class. One of the things I always think about, and this is one thing too, we talk about the media a lot here at Red State because you folks are very, Red State is a media outlet, and push back on the idea that work requirements remove benefits. I remember when Governor Paul LePage instituted his work requirements in the state of Maine, the AP had this headline that said, 9,000 Mainers lose their food stamps because of Governor LePage's welfare reforms. No, 9,000 people are now have the opportunity to go to work to be able to provide food for their family. And we need to learn to talk about putting people back to work as a positive thing. You need to push back on the media and say, no, we should be celebrating reforms that restore dignity. And we should be celebrating reforms that restore the working class. It is not a bad thing. Work is not a dirty word. And we have to get around that and say, push back a little bit on the AP and say, no, these are 9,000 Mainers that were given the opportunity to either work or volunteer. In Maine, they've seen their volunteer numbers go through the roof. And now these folks, if they didn't have a skill set, they're volunteering and learning a skill set so they can go out and get a job.
As someone who's on the radio, there are words you're not allowed to say. Work is not one of those words.
Yeah, I know. It's not something that the FCC bleeps
out
yet.
Right. If I said that on the radio, they wouldn't kick me off.
Yeah. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Although the AP might come knock on my door, I don't know. Talk about that work requirement thing. So we touched on that a second ago, but the power of work is empowering to allow someone to have that ability. You guys have done studies on that show time and time again, if you require people to work or look for a job while they're receiving benefits, that they will be off those benefits sooner because they will rise out of that problem, right? Rise out of poverty and off those programs.
Yeah, we just actually released a report last week that talked about this food stamp explosion. And not only did we find in the research of the number of people, like I said, that exploded from 17 million to 47 million Americans in just the last, since 2000, we found that people were staying on the rolls way longer than they used to. That not only were more Americans dependent on the federal government, on the food stamp program, the government to put food on their tables, but they were staying on there longer than they ever stayed on there. And again, it goes back to incentives, and what's required of you. And so as governors continue to submit, in 44 states right now, they have full or partial work waivers. 44 states. That's a lot of red state governors submitting those work waivers as well. And so we found that, over and over, when we looked at that they were staying on the welfare rolls longer because that work requirement was now there when it hadn't been before. I mean, the waiver was there when it hadn't been before.
That's really sad. So, as she pointed out, 44
states have at least a partial, some have full, but 44 states have some sort of waiver in place right now for food stamps.
So when you get home, ask your governor. That's a good point.
Yeah. And you can go to our website too, the FGA.org again, and look, we've got a map that not only talks about, in each state you can roll over the map and look at the percentage of increase of food stamps in your state, and then whether or not your state has a work waiver and on there too.
You know what's important? Oh, we're taking questions now, right here.
Oh, we do, but we need to magnify the voice. Well, first of all, thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much and appreciate that. Yeah, we want to magnify the voice. The Foundation for Government Accountability, we are only a 4-year organization and we're very small. We are small but mighty, and we are very focused on everything, like I said, removing the welfare class and trying to really raise people out of poverty and empower individuals and strengthen families. But we're one organization. And I want to greet you out in the hall and exchange contact information, because my job at FGA is to give you the tools to be a powerful activist in your state to implement these reforms. The number one thing that my job is to be the online and grassroots outreach to all of you. And I come up through the activist ranks. I'm a mom. I tell everybody my claim to fame is I'm a loudmouth mom that had a blog, and I was just taught people how to, magnify their voice and fight for those values that we believe in as Americans. And so, my goal is to connect with you and find ways that we can help you be really effective in your state to roll back some of these programs and really empower people. So yes, I will connect with you.
We only have time for one more.
There's a gentleman right behind you. Yes, sir. His question was our funding. So we are not funded at all by the government. We are funded by private individuals. We have a 501c3 and a 501c4. But yeah, we have a small amount. I don't do the donor thing, so we do have a small amount that is some philanthropy organizations, but it is almost entirely of individuals who believe in empowering individuals at the local level and really, turning back the size and the scope of the government.
All right, we got to go now before Leon gets a hook and takes me off. But tell everybody where they can find you online.
So you can find me at thefga.org. You look at our staff page. You can email me. I'm gonna be right out here outside these doors. If you're a local activist and want to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Kristina Ribali. If you search the RedState Gallery, the RedState Gathering hashtag, you can find my information on there too. And please be in touch with me. My job is to make you a more efficient and effective activist at your state, and I want to do that any way that I can. And thank you all for being here. And thank you, Brad.
Don't forget to listen to Coffee and Markets.
Yes.
You can find it on the front page of Red State every day. We are now on the radio in Chicago, so if you live in Chicago, you can listen to us on 1590 WCGO. You can also find the show on their website, 1590wcgo.com, and of course, you can find it on Red State every day. So, thank you.
Thanks everyone
Kristina.
again. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon.
Thank you.